My name is David Prescott. Welcome aboard. I'm joined, hi John, excellent, in the UK. I'm joined by Fritzi Horstman. Just going to do a quick introduction here, and then we have a really interesting program planned for you. So we're really glad that you're here. We know that you're busy. It's just great that you can make it, and it's just great to have you here. So a quick note of gratitude to all at Safer Society of the past, present, and future. We're a nonprofit dedicated to providing services and resources for preventive and restorative responses to sexual and social violence. And so this webinar is right in our wheelhouse. We were founded by this person here, Faye Honey Knopp, somebody I almost got to meet once, but was an absolute firebrand, who effectively started a lot of the services that are now in place around the US, around North America, frankly, and nowadays around the world. Through all of her revolutionary efforts. We're now we're led by Mary Falcon, our executive director. We have Steve Zioli, our marketing director and sort of all around strategic planner as well. And my partner in all of this behind the camera is Sarah Snow Haskell. Without all of these folks' efforts, there would be no Safer Society. So it's really great to have you here. Together, we all believe that knowledge grows when it's shared. So we really appreciate your coming and joining us today. We publish a magazine, we do these free webinars, we do live online trainings, archived online trainings, and of course, we're best known for our professional books and our workbooks. So we've got lots of things in the offing. Happy to announce an upcoming training in the Good Lives model that's been asked after for a long time. That'll be yours truly with Gwen Willis. Some training on human trafficking and just all kinds of other things. I will put in a shout out to Liam Marshall, who's training on working with people who are in complete and categorical denial. That will be on Friday. It's his encore performance of all of this. So just head over to our website and you'll see it. We've also got Jill Levinson coming up on trauma impact and self-care. She'll also be doing a keynote address at this year's ATSA conference, it appears. I just got a notice about that. Jill was also just in the area passing through and visiting us. We have April Alexander on cultural humility in corrections assessment and treatment. And of course, Stephen Andrew, one of the best motivational interviewing trainers in the world, will be joining us to talk about its use with intimate partner violence. So what to expect? Well, for the first half, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to watch a video as well. And in the second half, we'll have our audience interaction via the chat and the Q&A. And then afterwards, if you can, please do give us your feedback via the survey at the end. And how it all works is, again, use the chat and Q&A features towards the bottom of your screen. I can't respond to when people raise their hand, so please don't push that button. Just use the chat and the Q&A. The intended audience is professional, so don't forget to understand everything that we say in the spirit in which it's intended. And if you have any concerns, feel free to use the survey at the end to offer us feedback on the process itself. Obviously, kindness matters, and our time is short, so unfortunately, we can only respond to the comments and questions that are directly related to the topic. However, we will give you lots of information about where you can go to learn more about Fritzi's work. And thank you for keeping your statements respectful throughout. Okay, and with that, I just want to say hi, Fritzi. Thanks for being here today. I know you're out west, so we had some interesting conversations about what time all of this was happening at. So on that note, how would you like to proceed? I think we might be starting with a video.
Yes, let's start with Step Inside the Circle, which has been seen by over 3 million people. And David, it's exciting to be here, and thank you to the audience for stopping in. I'm very excited to share what I've learned about our humanity. So I'm going to bring up Step Inside the Circle. It just takes a moment.
Sure. And as you do this, I just want to remind folks, Fritzi's website is Compassion Prison Project. I think if you just do a Google search on that, Compassion Prison Project, and you will find it. And thank you for that, Sarah.
And here we go.
Great.
It's time now, everyone. We're gonna do the Compassion Trauma Circle. Is everyone ready to face their past with compassion? Is that a yes? Yeah! While you were growing up, during your first 18 years of life, if a parent or other adult in the household often or very often would swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle. If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured, step inside the circle. If you often felt that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, step inside the circle. If your family lived in extreme poverty, step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle. Step inside the circle.
There is no shame. There is no shame. There is no shame.
I'm so good. Good to see you. How are you? Amen. Noel, good to see you. Welcome. I was abused as a young girl. I was beaten by my mother. I was verbally abused by my mother. I was sexually abused by another man. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a rageaholic. I've driven drunk. I've sold drugs. I was a juvenile delinquent. Probably my story is similar to most of your stories in here. I'm white and I'm female and nothing happened to me. So, I got a get out of jail free card. And so I'm here now because I see myself in every one of you.
I'm a traumatized child, raised by a traumatized child. My mother was traumatized as well as her parents.
Like he said, we wasn't born in the world of being evil people. My mother didn't want me. She hid her pregnancy. She tried to flush me down the toilet. But as I learned about these things, I always asked myself what was wrong with me.
When I come to the circle and I see everybody else and she's reading off the questions and people stepping in further, and I look at my childhood and I'm like, a lot of these people in this yard are just like me.
There was one step I should have taken that I didn't take, and I saw some of my brothers and my friends take that step, and I felt like such a coward. I wasn't brave enough to be there with them when they took that step. And every round after that, I took the most difficult step.
Our traumas kept us separated. We were all on the circumference, all standing apart. But once we began to acknowledge our traumas publicly, it brought us all closer together.
In prison, you're not supposed to show your weaknesses in prison, though. But to want to do that, to walk in that circle like that, and to take each step forward was a reminder to ourselves that we still have a humanity and we worthy to be loved though. Most people on the outside don't understand that we want to change so we can re-enter society better than what we left it.
And I think one of the things that when you was yelling at no shame and you had us yelling it out, it was freeing us too. And it was a point to where when I was looking at that and we was all looking at it in a circle, you can hear that echo, no shame. And that was very powerful, especially coming from a little lady like you.
I'm 76 years old. I've seen a lot. I don't like talking. I like to meet people that understand what's happening without words, and you one of them. Today has been one of the best days I had in my whole entire life since I've been out of these 40 years.
Your true spirits are not violent. Your true spirits are magnificent.
All right. You know, as I watch that, and I've seen it several times now, I keep thinking about the importance of the role that you play in all of this, that many of us have done research, many of us have written reports, many of us have gone and done evaluations of programs, but there's nothing like somebody coming in with the perceptions and the experience and the soul of a documentarian. Somebody with real creativity to really take a snapshot of what it's all about. So I think I speak for all of us when I say I thank you very much. And I guess I'm for those of us that are a little bit newer to you, how did you end up getting involved in all of this? What's the story behind this?
Well, in 2018, I was given a book by my friend Seth, and he said, it's Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. And when I read that book, I realized my traumatized past and my behavior had nothing to do with the person that I was. And that information literally changed my life. It's like, oh, so my road rage, the way I treat my family, the way I treat my friends, my outbursts, my fight or flight, that's just my trauma. That's not the person that I am. And then a month later, like literally I finished the book and then I volunteered at a prison, and it was a maximum security prison. And I was like, wait a second, these aren't bad people. These aren't the monsters we've been sold. These aren't the super predators. These are basically arrested, developed men who need love, compassion, and have the potential to transform if given the tools and the attention they need.
I just have to comment, and this will actually make sense more to some folks in the audience perhaps, but I'm impressed with the transformation that can happen from reading a book to reflecting on your life to actually taking some sort of effective action.
Yeah, well, I cried all day. I was in there crying all day. I heard stories, people in solitary for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And I heard what we're doing as a society. This is our job. This is our collective agreement that this is how we treat people in prison. And when I heard these stories, I said, I can't walk away from this. I can't just go back to my daily life and go make movies. I have to do something about this. So I created a curriculum, and 4 months later, they let me back in that same prison. And that's when Compassion Prison Project was born. And that's when we developed that circle. The guys in that, it's a different prison than where we filmed, but those guys helped me figure out what that circle needs to be and how we the mechanics of it. And what's interesting is this morning, I woke up and I said, oh, wait a second. Now we need a resilience circle. So the next thing I'm going to do, we're going to create a resiliency circle. A compassion resilience circle. So the minute we do the compassion trauma circle, we do the resilience circle. So that's the new part of the curriculum that just happened this morning. So you're on the,
nice.
it's breaking news.
All right, excellent, very good. And yeah, another comment, by the way, you're getting some great reviews in the chat. And I did want to say, in case the person missed it, the name of the book that she was talking about is The Body Keeps the Score. And I see somebody else put it into the chat as well. And it's by Bethel Vanderkolk. And he's a great presenter. He certainly has had an interesting and at times very controversial existence, but his knowledge of trauma is as good as it gets. And many of us, I mentioned this to you last night, Fritzi, I know that as a result of reading some of his research, I actually, as a clinician, went back and became a certified trauma-sensitive yoga instructor, and have introduced a lot of Bessel's work related to it in yoga and meditation into the treatment of adults and juveniles. Never as much as I would like to, but we all do what we can. You know, I'm just gonna, if it's okay, Fritzi, I'm gonna jump right into something that I really noticed, you know, I've worked in prisons and other high security settings, and every day that I worked there, I left knowing that I was going home and they weren't. That's number one. And then number two also is a reflection on just how awful the racial disparities are in prison, especially, you know, Black and brown people getting arrested. There's nothing like working in a prison to really bring home, just in my case, how privileged I am as a white male. I wonder what kinds of experiences you had as you started implementing this in terms of those disparities, that is.
Well, it is. I mean, just creating that circle. Sam Brown, he's one of the guys in the film who said our traumas separate us. And he's also in Honor Yard. He's the man on the microphone in Honor Yard, which is the other film that we created out of that day. Sam Brown went around to everybody before we did the circle. You know, he said, there's a white lady coming in and she's going to be doing the circle. I mean, I'm sitting there in the middle, really mostly Black and brown men in that circle. But he had to really talk to them and let them know that I'm on their side, that I'm advocating for them. And what I'm kind of understanding, and I know we're not supposed to say that we're colorblind, but what I understand is what happens is trauma shows our humanity. And it doesn't matter. I was traumatized. I have an ACE score of 8. Most of the guys, so we did our own research in prisons. We sent out the ACE, we put an ad in the Prison Legal News, and we've got responses from around the United States. So we have over 2,700 ACE questionnaires that we could cull from. And what we learned in the United States, 64% have at least one ACE. In prison, it's 98%. In the United States, it's about 15% have 4 or more ACEs. In prison, it's 70 to 80%. And then 64% of the people in prison have 6 or more ACEs. So, and as many of your people that watching this may know, if you have more than 6 ACEs, it lowers your life expectancy by 20 years. My parents, my mother died at 69, my dad died at 61. High ACEs, smokers, but their addictive tendencies, killed them. Their immune responses, they didn't have an immune response after all that adversity. So that's what we're dealing with. So I'm going to say it's really the trauma to prison pipeline. I don't think it's the school to prison pipeline. The thing that happens at school is we don't help the people learn because we can't deal with their trauma responses. So, we have special ed in that, but guess what? Special ed is a trauma unit, and people are not addressing special ed as if these people are traumatized. It's that they need to be just separated from the rest. And so we really have to start rethinking about how we're educating and how we're raising our children. And the reason I chose prison, and I think prison is a good place for me to start my work, is it's a place I can focus on. And if I can get that father in prison to learn about his ACEs and about his child adversity, he's going to call his girlfriend or his wife and he's going to say, we got to stop hurting our kids. And I want this to go viral. I want the notion of adverse childhood experiences to go through all prisons. And that's why I'm going to jump in and tell you what, I'm not letting you talk, David, so I'm sorry. But we're creating a 12-part video series called Trauma Talks. And it's, the idea is that you watch an hour of content about trauma, adverse childhood experiences, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, developmental trauma, attachment trauma, all these things that really rewire the brain and actually lower the amount of gray matter in your brain. You watch it, you sit in community with the people that you're living with, you do the workbook. Right now, we're done with episode 1 and the workbook is over 40 pages. So it's just chock full of material for the people in prison. And healing, when you sit in community is when you begin to heal and you begin to see that you're not alone. And that's the key. So Trauma Talks is, that's what we're raising money for right now, to pay for those workbooks, because those workbooks just from the printer is going to cost over $15. There's 1.8 million people in the United States that are incarcerated. So I want everyone to get a workbook and to be able to watch that video. And we're doing a pilot program at Valley State Prison it's in Chowchilla, California. There are 4,000 people. 4,000 people in that prison are going to have access to the video and to the workbook. And possibly by the end of the year or early 2022, we're going to have a trauma-informed, trauma-responsive, trauma-sensitive, trauma-aware prison in the United States. That's what we're doing.
Excellent, excellent. And I saw there was a question about some of the research that you cited. I don't know if you have any authors' names off the top of your head. This is a group of psychologists, or there's many psychologists, and so they wonder these things. I've also said to feel free. Okay, and somebody's just put up the link to your childhood trauma statistics at your website. So very good. And you're being asked which prison is doing the pilot. It was in Chowchilla.
Yeah, it's called Valley State Prison, and it's led by this incredible warden and a correctional officer. He wants my correctional officer curriculum to be brought in as well. So that's, we have buy-in from a whole, basically the whole organization. I know we have to still get buy-in from the correctional officers because they're trained. I met a correctional officer on vacation. I said, what do you do? He says, I babysit for the state. So that's his perception of people that are in prison. He's babysitting infants, or adolescents, which developmentally it could be true, but still the perception has to shift that, wait a second, I'm coaching people that need help.
Yeah. And of course,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and of course, in environments where people get treated like children, we shouldn't be surprised if they act like them sometimes as well. And so it sounds like I'm sort of envisioning this again. I think like a clinician as this really remarkable front, avant-garde or advancing of the guard into many of these environments to really, really, truly raise awareness. So I guess I'd ask, yours, you come in with this particular perspective. How can those institutions that really take a look in the mirror and say we need to become more trauma informed, we can raise their consciousness, we can give them workbooks, et cetera. How do we maintain that kind of a change over time?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I don't know, but to me, the first step is awareness. So if people don't even know what's going on, that people in prison are traumatized, that people working in prison are traumatized, nothing's going to change. So, we're at phase 1, which is create awareness throughout the United States. Right. Phase 2 is have prisons become healing and education centers instead of punitive centers. So that's the shift, and extending that, I don't know, because I'm taking a big bite first. I have to chew this bite before I can get on to the next course. But, it's the front lines. But I had this vision this morning, in addition to it was a great night. It's a great night to wake up to. I had this vision this morning that the guys that I'm going to work with at Valley State Prison, they're going to write an op-ed about what a trauma-aware, trauma-sensitive prison looks like. They're going to write an op-ed. It's going to get published, and we're going to start changing our perspective of what people in prison are. I mean, one guy that I've interviewed, he and his friends in prison raised $30,000 to put a kid through college, right? Or not through college, through a year of his last year at high school. It was $30,000. They raised that money. That's what's possible behind bars. And if we have support from the public, like, let's get a project. What prison do you live near? Let's get in there and get these guys and women involved. Let's motivate them so that they can be their best themselves, so that they can know they have possibility instead of, going back to the crimes that they've committed. So it's the Giving Back Project. And that's just one of the things that will reinforce and build bridges back to society.
Excellent. Thank you. And just to respond to a couple of things, I think the person might have deleted the question, but I did want to say, we've been talking about ACEs, and ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experience. And ACE scale or ACE measure is absolutely worth a Google search to find out more about it. It's really a screening tool. There's many ways to think about measuring trauma, but that's a really good one. Fritzi, I'm seeing a ton of questions coming in, so I might start with Emma's question, which is, it seems that the police hold a powerful role in terms of how they interact at the time of an incident. What do police, including recruits, need to understand and do differently so that people get helpful outcomes instead of prosecution? Any thoughts?
Well, it's the same with correctional officers, and they call them cops in the prison system. The people living in prison call correctional officers cops. So it's really, I think it's all about trauma informed. I think it's really important that everyone in society really knows what trauma does to the body, brain, and spirit. When you're in your brainstem, you're in fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, your body's going to do what it has to do to stay alive, including shutting off your prefrontal cortex, which is the place where you negotiate, where you deliberate, where your wisdom comes from, but also your morality and your understanding of consequences and right and wrong. So when that goes offline, what have you got? You've got an animal that's trying to keep himself alive. And so when you see a policeman shooting at someone running away, he's not in his cortex, he's in his brainstem, and he still thinks he's under attack. So they need training. They need to know about their brainstem. They need to have awareness that if I'm freaking out, I got to either get help or get training so that I don't react and I don't kill somebody because I'm freaking out. And that's the same thing with, on the other side, when people commit crimes. Mm-hmm. Policemen commit crimes. Everyone commits crimes because they're in their brainstem. And everyone needs to be accountable. I'm not saying there's no accountability and there aren't victims, but basically, I mean, my sense is that who's doing the crime? It's the animal instinct is doing the crime. And it's a whole nother element of conversation that we have to deal with. But if we're going to let the cops off, we got to let the incarcerated people off. I mean, I've talked with a guy on death row. He did his ACE test. He has 10 and we have a supplemental ACE test. So basically had all 20 questions he had checked. He had everything, he'd been annihilated. His father blew his own brains out on this man, Wesley Perky's bed. When Wesley got home, he saw his father's brains on his bed. Wesley was committed two crimes and was on death row, and Donald Trump executed him. But he had redeemed himself and he had taken a look at his behavior and who he was. And I wish I had his quote available, but it blew me away. And that we killed a man, we as a society, and that includes me, we killed a man who had found redemption, who had looked at himself in the mirror and said, you know what? I'm human. I love myself. I did a really bad thing, but I deserve to live. And so that's what we really have to consider. And we also have to consider solitary confinement. One prison in Colorado, one prison system, the Colorado prison system did away with long-term solitary confinement. And what they found is that there was an 80% reduction in violence after they ended long-term solitary. And you know why? Because when you put someone in solitary, you say that now if you behave, we'll let you out. But when you're in solitary, you're back in your brainstem, you're back in your amygdala, and you're in fight or flight and freeze, as this person said. You're in that state all the time. It's nonstop. You can't behave because you're in the animal, and you're in the animal kingdom. And so what would get you out is if you were in your cortex, which would be reading, communication, being in circles, and being rehabilitated. So, you know, what we're doing in solitary is a whole nother issue, death row, solitary. And what they do in California, like I just know some of the little things, like they'll take a guy's new sneakers away from him because they're pissed off at him. And remember, 80% of the people in prison are indigent. That means they can't afford a lawyer. So do you think their family that just got them that brand new pair of sneakers can afford that? And so we got to really think about what we're doing on all levels, phone calls, food. You know, people go to commissary, they're buying a soup for 50 cents that I can get in Costco for 10 cents. So what is that? Why are we taxing the poor like that? So these are things we have to really start, like we have to evaluate and write our congressmen and say, you know what, enough. These people have had enough. The people in bars, behind bars. And one more thing, and I know I talk a lot without
It's all
giving
good.
The life expectancy of a correctional officer in the United States is 59 years old. Why is that? Because they're living in a state of toxic stress, fight or flight, and PTSD. And unlike war veterans, the war doesn't end. They're put into battle. They're told that this is the enemy, and they create enemies. And so, yes, they have to watch their back. But what if they were nice? What if they were mentors? What if they were coaches? Do you think you'd go to work and feel like, oh, wait, my life is at stake? No, that person is going to want to talk to you and find out how your day was. What's your dog's name? But they call that manipulation. So when you're talking, when you're getting friendly with somebody in prison that's on the other side of the bars, that's manipulation. So you're damned if you do, and if you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, these things can be so incredibly complicated. And one of the things that's always bothered me, and I've shared this with you privately, is that there hasn't been more research done on people who work inside of prisons. And it's not just the how does this affect the lifespan of the individual, but across multiple generations, especially when that prison is in a small town in some corner of California or upstate New York or what have you. And then even then within them, sometimes the culture of overtime scams that sometimes take place, leading to people wondering what their purpose is in life. Looking at the clock, I'm also going to come back to a couple of the comments. There's been a lot of messages coming in, so folks, I will do the very best that I can. I'm a part of, Hannah mentions, I'm a part of a team working to change the department to become trauma responsive. Thank you, Hannah. We can identify tons on specific trauma-informed interventions, but the next steps are so big with such deeply held beliefs about what prison is and the current structures in place. Is it possible to deeply change within a couple of years? And I see Fritzi's changed quite a bit. I mean, you had the transformative moment. I might have some data, but Fritzi, what do you think?
Well, like Einstein said, you can't solve the problem the same. You know that quote. You can't solve the problem the same way you approached it. If we go into the whole research model, if we go into the whole like, let's test this and see. No, this has to be seismic. This has to be a decision, and I think it all has to be like, if you decide, if all, how many people are on this call? If all 198 people decide, okay, we got to change the prison system, we're going to do it. That's 198 people more now that are putting into this quantum field. Because since we're talking Einstein, I'm just going to go quantum on you. You know, thoughts create reality, and we can change this. We can change it because we decide it's so. I know you're all scientists here, but if we do research and we take 5 and 15 and 20 years to say, yes, people in prison have ACEs, we're not going to get anywhere. I can tell you right now, people in prison have ACEs. And I can tell you right now, the only way, here's another thing, 95% of the people in prison are coming home to us. And 66% go back into prison. That's two more crimes for every 3 people that come out. Is that what we want? Do we want to create more victims? Or do we want to create leaders, game changers, educated fathers, educated mothers who raise their children and don't create any more ACEs? And that's the other thing with correctional officers. There's a 39% higher risk of suicide if you're a correctional officer, and 20% more chance of divorce or separation if you're a correctional officer. So if 2 of those events happen, that's 2 ACEs that you've got for your child already. So we're already starting the cycle of adversity for that family. That cycles out to the community. That cycles out back to prison, or he's another correctional officer doing the same damage. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. And the fact that prisons are way outside of town, I got to drive 4 hours to get to Valley State Prison, 3 hours to get to Kern Valley. The fact that they're out doesn't mean they're not affecting us. They're affecting us now in our society, in our day. The homeless people on the street, guess what? 50%, I think it's 50% or about, have been incarcerated at some point in their lives. So we're not doing our job as a society to be a container of transformation. Instead of, we're just containers. We're warehousing people and telling them they're pieces of crap.
Yeah.
Boy, I talk a lot on this one. I'm sorry, David.
No, this is great. No, everybody's heard me talk before. I just have to say that actually the number you quoted is about 1/3 of the people that registered for this, because most people like to view these things after the fact.
Fantastic.
So one comment here is the police that I've seen in multiple forms. The police and corrections officers should also have CIT, crisis intervention team training, so that they can learn about mental health. And boy, isn't that just a sign of the times that we have police officers saying, we don't know what to do in a lot of these circumstances. And so that's an important point. They need to be trained in mental health issues, mitigation for all criminal cases in the trauma-informed courts. That will get us closer to phase 2. Thank you to that person. Fight, flight, or freeze, as Donald was saying to everybody. There was a question about the viewing the video, and the answer is yes, you can see it later. One person commenting, solitary is never a good idea. Again, from my research junkie perspective, I think the research has been quite clear about that. It's a miracle it doesn't do even more damage than it does. But the jury is back in on this one. The prisons are trying to and mail increased phone system and canteen. I was a mentor and coach when I was a sergeant for 17 years. Thank you. And was never afraid of incarcerated, but only other officers' actions. That comment made publicly, I just want to say thank you, Donald. That has always been my experience in all of my years. I was only a little bit anxious once. Somebody else, Fritzi, is calling for you to do a TED Talk. I think I'm seeing that right. I was at a max and quit after 2 months after seeing no rehabilitation. That was a question that I had for you as well. In your travels in and out of prisons, what have you seen of the clinical services there?
Well, I don't really get to see, I'm kind of cordoned off. I'm taken from the gate to the chapel, and I'm stuck in a room, not stuck in a room, but I'm in a room with 30 men. That's it. That's my exposure. But I have talked to clinicians who say, so here's one story. A guy was banging on the wall. He says, I want a phone call and I want a shower. And he was banging on the wall. Next day, I want a phone call and a shower. Eventually he cut himself, and 5 days later, they gave him a phone call and a shower. But what does it take to give somebody a phone call and a shower? I mean, that's this is, to me, this is, I have in my presentation, this is medical abuse. People are, what happens is the staff, the clinicians get indoctrinated by the officers. The officers like, these people are subhuman. And I just don't, I don't know what day it happens that you decide that someone is not a human. I don't know what that day is, but we need a new day to say, you know what, everyone on this planet is perfect. They did some bad things, but they're perfect. And that's the thing. And Donald, I just love you. I have to just say, thank you for all of these you're saying. Donald's been on the front line, so he knows and he's seen. And the COs, but see, the COs are not monsters either. They're just trained this way. This is what they're told to do. And the unions are one of the issues, the biggest issues I can see. They're trying to get more customers. They want more people in prison. They want to lower the threshold for a felony robbery from $250. So you get a felony if you steal something. I mean, look, I'm not advocating crime, but I'm advocating common sense. And if someone is stealing something from Best Buy or from Lowe's, they need help. They need help and they need services. And and this is a very socialist view, but there's less crime in socialist countries. And I think that's something we have to look at. There's less crime and there's more compassion. I know someone here is from Norway, and what they're doing in Norway in the prison system is fantastic. And there are models for us to follow. And by the way, Valley State Prison, the prison I'm going to be going to, they're also implementing some of the Norway practices like normalization and activation. And, the only sentence, the only punishment is your loss of liberty. Everything else remains the same. We got to keep people interested in their society. We can't just say, you know what, we're throwing you away and you're a piece of crap and we don't care about you anymore. And it's a legacy of we don't care about you anymore. Well, what about a legacy of we care so much about you? You're important to us because if you succeed, I succeed. If you succeed, my street's not going to have homeless people. If you succeed, you're paying taxes in our roads. We're going to pay into the roads. And that's called freedom. That's called freedom when people return to us and they're actually able to thrive. And, that's freedom and that's liberty. And that's what I have. That's why I'm a United States citizen, because I want everyone to be free.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. I did see one question there. Are there social workers within prison settings? I know they're utilized for reentry, and as somebody with a social work background myself, I'd say absolutely. And they're very, very, very seriously overworked within those settings. And so just scrolling down through some of these things, I saw a nice comment from Jim in New Jersey that was out to all. So thanks for joining again, Jim. A great person. And just going through this, the video looked very similar to the film The Work. Have you seen that? Very moving about therapy in prison? I haven't seen it. Yes, and
someone also mentioned Prison Within. So in Trauma Talks, one of the films we'll be using is The Prison Within. On my podcast, I haven't released it yet, but I interviewed Eldred Jackson III, who's one of the people that was in The Work. And we're also including The Wisdom of Trauma. And then there's a film called Prison Terminal, which was nominated for an Academy Award. It's a short film, but it's about hospice in prison and about the men who serve the people that are dying. And it's a heartbreaking film, just to see the men getting together and taking care of the people that are leaving us, and the love and the transformation that happens with everyone in that film is incredible. So we're bringing those films to the people in prison so they can start seeing what restorative justice looks like, what hospice looks like, what service looks like, what trauma looks like. And I also wanted to mention to Aaron, if you're at Mule Creek Prison, let's get Trauma Talks there, because we're not going to get enough clinicians in prisons. With the peer-to-peer model is what we need. We need people to start helping each other in prison. And I want to teach prison residents EMDR, tapping, somatic experiencing, yoga practices. I want all that in the prisons, taught by the people that are living there. And maybe the officers can also learn this as well. I mean, EMDR is going to help that PTSD. So we need to get training. New York City has a model, it's called Thrive, I think it's called, where it's peer-to-peer help. And I think that's a great model because it's not going to cost the prison anything. And guess what? People coming home are going to be able to teach that to their communities as well. So it pays to train the people in prison because they're sitting around doing nothing. Let's get them sitting around doing something. doing something transformative.
Thank you. And another comment that I see coming in from James well, I won't say in case it was posted anonymously, I can't ever quite tell. I worked in a medium security prison for 12 and a half years and spent most of my time caring for inmates in the SEG unit where the segregation unit where the chronically ill, mentally ill were. There were 2 therapists for all 1,350 inmates, which is just astonishing. Another a more rhetorical question, but I think one we should all think about, which is how do we talk to parents whose child has been raped and murdered? They may think differently about the people in prison, and they could be huge advocates. Fritzi, this seems right in your wheelhouse.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you know, I've been victim of crimes. We've all had things perpetrated upon us, and it's horrible. You know, you come home and your belongings are stolen. You feel like you've been violated, or I had sexual abuse when I was a little girl. So there has to be accountability, and there has to be an acknowledgement. The problem with the justice system as it is, it's a sterile environment where the victim sits in the sidelines as we condemn the next person to a lifetime in prison. There's a thing called restorative justice, and that's mentioned in The Prison Within. That's the subject of The Prison Within. And by the way, the wisdom of trauma, Step Inside the Circle and CPP, Compassion Prison Project, is in the wisdom of trauma and is part of our curriculum as well. But restorative justice, I think, is the only model that's really going to work, because people are still traumatized after their child has been murdered, and they're traumatized and they have nothing to grab onto. But what if that person who committed the crime sat in a conversation with the people that are left without a daughter or a son? What if they had a conversation? And what if they got to say, look, how are you going to make this right? How are you going to do this? You're an indigent, impoverished person in prison. How are you going to make this right? Well, I want to know how he's going to make it right. And oh God, I'm going to talk about, so there's a man in Massachusetts, and he murdered his girlfriend and his baby. He stabbed the baby in the middle of the baby's body. Okay. And he'd written to me, you know, I get hundreds of letters, and he wrote to me and he said, I can't forgive myself. And I hadn't heard about his crime. I didn't know. And I was just like, oh, just forgive yourself, you know, more kind of like a blanket thing. I read about his crime. And so this guy, he says, if I forgive myself, that means I've condoned what I've done. And, you know, he can't live with himself, but he also says he doesn't remember doing what he did. So remember, he was here, he wasn't here. And, you know, and of course I don't condone what he did, but he says, the only thing I want, the mother and father of my girlfriend, they're going to die soon. And I want them to know how I feel. That's restorative justice. If you know somebody is so mortified at what they've done and will do anything to give that life back, then you know there is justice. And I said to him, his name is Brian, I said, he's a beautiful artist. I said, do your art, make art for that family, and do what you can to right that wrong. Make that your life. Make that the Giving Back Project. Change that life. Change it. So believe me, I'm haunted by what they have done, but I'm also haunted what was done to them. And it's the same thing. What you put in is what you get out. And if you put in violence, you get violence. One of the guys, Jesse, he said, he's one of the guys I work with at Kern. He says, I thought it was normal to be violent. I thought it was normal to beat up your, you know, his watching domestic violence. He thought it was normal to beat up your wife. And so in a society that normalizes violence, that's what you're going to get. What you put in is what you get out. And now I think we got to start putting in who we really are, which is compassionate, loving beings, and see these monsters as the creative, beautiful geniuses that they are.
And can be. I know the Dalai Lama has always insisted that people were born gentle. And so this has always been kind of an anchor point. And I think a lot of us share your view that, yeah, the crimes are horrific, and so is what has happened to them. I'm going to focus in on one comment that I got. It was addressed only to us, so I shouldn't mention the person's name, but it's I think a very interesting point from someone who works in a prison. I don't think it's just custodial staff who need to be encouraged to understand trauma and ACEs. I think a lot of clinical training focuses on treating offending and pays little attention to the role of trauma in the cultivation of criminogenic factors or risk-related elements of this person's life. Many of the things that we call risk can be understood as survival strategies. So that comment from the UK, I think, is really, really important, especially that distinction between actually providing the treatment. Here we go, let's do this with your window of tolerance, as opposed to really understanding and accounting for the deep amounts of trauma that exist in our communities. And if we're honest, that have torn many of our communities apart. Going back to the racial disparities in imprisonment, I think California is something of a poster child of a state where entire communities have been torn apart because of all the Black men that end up being incarcerated. So I'm looking forward to seeing a community-based version of what you have to offer.
I agree. The thing is, if I have to stay on a very narrow track, though. I can't okay, we got to do it in the communities. We got to do it. The returning citizens. If I do that, then, I have 2 full-time employees and 4 part-time employees and 1,000 volunteers. That's what we've got. But, we're raising money like nobody's business, but we're not sustained right now. So we got to just stay on our track, making trauma talks and getting that awareness out, because if we dilute our mission, nothing's going to change. So we got our blinders on. It's trauma and it's in prisons. And then this material that we're creating for prisons, we can share with the communities. We're happy to, and we can repurpose it and make it for the general public. But right now, we're the Compassion Prison Project. But remember, it's not the Compassion Prisoner Project. It's the Compassion Prison Project, which means everybody in that prison. We have compassion for everybody in that prison. And that's really what's so important, because I want to make sure those officers go home and feel good and don't want to. There's another big issue in what we're paying in the prison system is overtime. Thousands of hours in one prison in California in 1 month, we're paying $20,000 in overtime. No, 20,000 hours in overtime, which per month, I believe for all 35 prisons is about $17.6 million. Multiply that by 12, what have you got? You've got, we could transform every single person in the California prison system with that money. People are waiting in line for months and years to get these services. Oh, the Mule Creek person, let's do trauma talks there. I think I said that already, I don't know, but I just want to make sure that please reach out to me, Fritzi at compassionprisonproject.org. And anybody who has prisons that need help, we're here. We're doing pilots, and everybody needs this information, because therapy is, having 2 therapists for 1,300 people, or 13, I don't know what it was, but that's not sustainable. And that's not going to help, especially when, as you saw in the film, the most traumatized people in our society are living in prison. The 3 largest mental health centers in the United States are the Cook County Jail in Chicago, LA County Jail, and Rikers Island. What does that say?
Yeah. And I guess Rikers is on the chopping block, which is some good news, although I don't know what's going to come in behind it. And I think a really important point. Thank you, Carrie, for raising this, which is, you got thoughts on what many of us can do locally and immediately?
Yes. First off, please share Step Inside the Circle. I'll put a link in the chat. Please share it so that people start really seeing what's possible, what's happening, that people are traumatized in prison. Please share, and then get involved with Compassion Prison Project. Come be a volunteer, and then, or come raise some money so we can pay you to work with us. I mean, who knows? But also, just locally, if you're going to get local, first of all, do you know how many prisons are in your state? Do you know what their policies are of solitary, of the death penalty? Do you know how many people are on death row? What's the unions? How are the unions influencing? Do you have a union? What's the salary of your correctional officer? How are they being treated? How much overtime? All these questions you need to know. And then meet with your congresspeople. And if you have a congressperson that wants to talk to me, I'll come and do a presentation. I mean, this is on, we're doing this. I mean, the United States is going to become trauma-informed, trauma-responsive, trauma-sensitive, and trauma-aware in the next 3 years. That's it. We're done with this old paradigm. We can't sustain it. We can't sustain it. And it's killing everybody who's working in that prison. Literally, it's killing them. There's suicides. They come home. People who work in prisons don't know how to connect to their families. They don't know how to be intimate. They have PTSD. So what kind of life is that? And that's the wife now, she's stressed out, or the husband, if it's a woman officer. I mean, it can't be sustained anymore. So we got to change it. And it starts with first of all, another thing though, how are we treating ourselves though? So we want change in the prison system, right? But are we being good to ourselves? Are we eating well? Are we taking care of ourselves? Like, I know I'm a workaholic because I've been traumatized all my life. So I'm still working on my own balancing, but am I spending time with my child? So how are we doing that? Because, as Gandhi says, whatever he says about changing I forget, all my quotes are out.
Oh, be the change you want to see in the world. It's a good one.
Thank you. But as he says that, what does that mean? What does that mean, be the change? It means really, I want a compassionate world. Well, I got to be a compassionate person, right? I got to be compassionate. And that means to myself, to my dog, to my family, to my community. So, before we start getting involved, I mean, I'm not saying don't get involved, but start doing that work too, because that's just as crucial, because we're putting it into the field. It's the ripples. Remember, like, if you smile at someone, that could have saved their life, right? That could save their life. You don't even know what's possible, what you're capable of. And, I say to everybody, all my volunteers, we do this, and maybe do this while you're sitting watching, because we're limitless. We can change the prison system in 3 years. We can. There's nothing stopping us except apathy and fear and, old habits. Stop watching Netflix. Let's get busy and change this. I mean, we're limitless. I know I'm limitless, and I know I'm going to I got a feather. Was it this morning? I got a hawk's feather this morning. I found it in the ground. I mean, I'd asked for an eagle's feather 4 days ago. So I got a hawk's feather, but that's what I'm capable of. I can create a feather in 4 days. So, I'm going to change the prison system in 3 years, but that's who you are too. Nice. I'm not bragging. I'm just bringing it out that this is who you are.
Yeah.
And yes. Go ahead.
I just can't resist sharing. I was hiking on the mountain behind my house this morning and found an enormous feather as well. How funny is that? I love a good coincidence, and that's when I have no idea what kind of bird it is. In my world, there's big birds and little birds, and
No, but that's the universe winking at us.
Yeah.
That's a wink.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I brought it up.
Yeah.
Why would I bring that up? I'm talking about prisons, and now we're talking about feathers, but that is the wink from the universe to say we are on the right track.
Yeah.
And corrections, fatigue to fulfillment. I gotta check that out. Oh yeah, Desert Waters. Yes, I've seen that one.
I know we got one question, which was, can you repeat all the names of all the movies that you've mentioned? And unfortunately, we can't. But actually, I can. Oh,
really quick. Wisdom of Trauma, The Prison Within, The Work, Prison Terminal, which you'll have to pay for. Step Inside the Circle. I think there was one more. Prison Terminal, Prison Within, Wisdom of Trauma, and The Wisdom of Trauma. And thank you to this beautiful audience. I can feel their hearts, even though I can't see them. I can feel their hearts, and that's important. It's important.
You're getting some very, very kind remarks, and which I can save and send to you, by the way. And I don't know to what extent folks can save the chat that are here and watching this live. Oh, one question: are you doing any work in South Carolina prisons?
Actually, yes. I have to find her email address, but I'm going to send her episode 1. We're going to get it there. We're getting South Carolina, yes. And North Carolina has 149 people on death row. And one of the guys, the correctional officer, saw that he was getting his bachelor's degree and stopped him. He'd been trying to get his bachelor's for 17 years, doing a correspondence course. And I don't know who that is. Carrie Reimer, is that her? Doing a correspondence course, and they stopped him getting his bachelor's degree. What are we doing? Who are we? Who are we stopping someone getting a bachelor's degree? But that's the other thing. I want the people in corrections to also have the opportunities for education. They're sitting there babysitting. They should also have the opportunities to get educated, to ascend. Like we pay the military, we let the military get education. Let's get the officers, let's dignify that occupation instead of, having them demeaned and people, hating who they are.
Sure.
But if we hate them, why are we letting them do this? It's like, it's bizarre. It's bizarre what we're doing, but we're going to change it but no shame, right? We can't shame anybody anymore.
Yeah.
That's the other part.
Amen.
Stop judging, because if we're judging, then we haven't worked something out in ourselves.
Yeah. And as I like to say, consider for a moment that all judgment is a form of violence. So on this note, I do need to say thank you. I'm going to include one last comment as a shout out to my friends in the UK. The Compassionate Mind Foundation in the UK is developing compassion-focused forensic practice. And indeed, I'll be doing some training with these folks later on this year at the ATSA conference. And so for the rest, I think Ken said it perfectly. Thank you, Fritzi. Your compassion and passion is so evident. Stay strong in the work. So thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you again. And I'm sure many of us will be in touch. So
and thank you, everyone. And remember, compassionprisonproject.org, and email me. Let's go. Let's do this. We can change the world, and you're limitless.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care, folks. We'll see you. Bye-bye.